the US economy seems to be in a slow but consistent path to recovery, strong enough for even the Fed maybe taper the economic stimulus over the summer. Boris Schlossberg, Managing Director for FX Strategy at BK Asst Management. Hello.
Hi, good to be with you.
Very welcome. So, Boris, do you think that it's really happening? Is the US economy really recovering?
No, I think it's actually still an open question. The US economy is clearly still growing, but it's having a lot of back and forth wobbles. Basically, we're seeing data that shows some rapid increases and then followed by long declines. And the consumer is still not very confident. We're seeing the consumer sentiment, for example, to come back down in the US economy. So there's a big open question as to how much growth the U.S. economy is going to go see in the next several months. Now, I think it's really too early to conclude that the U.S. economy is in a steady growth pattern, which is why I really don't think the Fed is going to taper off anytime soon. The Fed is going to err on the side of caution. They really want to see a sustained, strong recovery, and that means very likely that what they really want to see is 200,000 jobs for at least 3 months consecutively. If they feel the U.S. economy is making that many jobs consecutively for 3 months, only then will they begin to relax and maybe begin to feel that they could start to taper off the stimulus. But for now, I think it's too soon.
But do you think that this is why the euro is being so resilient?
Definitely. I think it's part of the reason the euro has been resilient is because of all of these doubts on the U.S. side. But the other thing I think that's happening is while clearly the situation in Eurozone is still very, very dire, and there's still contraction going on. What we're beginning to see now is probably that the worst is over. You're starting to see some recovery from the bottom. We're still not in expansionary mode in many of the European countries, but we're starting to see some recovery from the bottom. For example, Spain is starting to show a little bit of improvement. Even Greece is starting to show a little bit of improvement. And if the market is looking at that, the market is always discounting forward. So the market now is anticipating that perhaps Europe is going to start turning, and that's going to create more positive momentum for the euro.
So what's your forecast for the euro dollar in the medium and long term?
Well, it's interesting because the medium forecast for an upside in the euro is around 137. That was the top that we saw last year. And that looks like the euro has now made a big turn. It broke out of a key congestion level at around 133, 134. And it looks like it really wants to start to climb and challenge that high at 137. To the downside, it's being supported around 132. And really 130 is a very, very strong support level for the euro. So at these levels, it looks like the euro actually wants to go more up than it wants to come down. And it looks like it's in a small but very persistent upside trend.
Okay, let's change the subject a little bit to the yen.
Yes.
Do you think that the Bank of Japan is going to intervene again in the economy of the country, in the currency, in order to carry the yen, well, the dollar yen, again to 100 or even maybe 110?
Well, you know, the interesting thing about Japan, and I think this is something that is catching a lot of people by surprise, is how volatile the Japanese bond market is. This is the big problem for the Bank of Japan, because now as they created a lot of the stimulus, the Japanese bond market is starting to react very volatile and people are starting to sell Japanese bonds. It doesn't seem like it's a lot. For example, they go down by 10, 15 basis points. But remember, Japanese bonds are trading for less than 1%. So even a 25 basis point move in the Japanese bonds is a massive, 25% move in the value of the position. And this turbulence is what's creating so much problems for the long dollar yen position. Because if the Japanese bond market rebels against the BOJ stimulus, it's going to be very hard for dollar yen to continue on its path to 100 and 110. The other big problem right now that's happening, why we're having a correction in dollar yen, is that there were two things that were very favorable in the initial breakout. First, the big stimulus from the Bank of Japan, and second, the feeling amongst the investors that the U.S. economy was already corrected itself, was on its way to growth, and the Fed was going to taper. Now, that second part of the equation, whether the Fed will taper or not, is becoming a big question mark. And that is what's keeping the US dollar from rallying higher. So before you had this position where the US dollar rallied and the yen weakened. Now, the yen is not weakening so much, and the US dollar is no longer rallying because the market is not sure if the US economy is going to be very strong. So for dollar yen to really go 110 or 100 or 110, we have to have both of these factors align themselves going forward. And I think it's by no means a done deal. I think it's very much an open question whether dollar yen can go to 110. It was a very, very popular trade in the currency market, and now a lot of people have gotten hurt, and I think they're going to be much more careful with this trade going forward.
Okay, but if I want to trade right now, what currency would you recommend me to start with?
Well, I think right now, the euro is clearly looking like it's in an uptrend. I think the pound also looks relatively strong against the dollar. And I actually think that the Australian dollar, which has been decimated in the recent month because of the commodity decline and because of all of the problems with China, may be a bit oversold. And I think Canadian dollar represents right now a relatively decent value, perhaps not for 1,000 points, but maybe for the next 500 points to the upside, there's potential for the Canadian dollar to kind of strengthen. For the Australian dollar to kind of strengthen.
Okay, Boris, thank you very much for the advice.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.